Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the TiPS Technology and Professional Services Technology Adoption Festival. This is, in fact, the second one of these. We could call it a tradition, maybe. I think two's enough for a tradition. I'm Martin Spring. I'm from Lancaster University Management School, and I'm leading the TiPS program, the TiPS Accelerator. We're holding this first event in a festival. There's going to be an event each day this week, about which I'll say a bit more in a moment. And I will shortly introduce the speakers for today's session. First of all, I'd just like to give a little bit of background for those of you that don't know on TiPS. We've been going for just over 2 years now, and after an initial setting up period, we've been delivering support to law and accounting firms, mid-tier law and accounting firms, to adopt technology in various ways. So we've reached firms from literally one person to several hundred people over that period. TiPS is funded jointly by the Economic and Social Research Council and Innovate UK, which is the UK's innovation agency. And in that sense, it's quite an interesting program from the funding point of view, in that it combines those two funders. So it's combining the go-to research funder, so we are doing research, with the go-to innovation agency. So we're combining innovation with research in what we do. The accelerator is led from Lancaster University, and I have colleagues at Lancaster University who some of you may meet later in the week in other sessions in the festival. It's in partnership with other universities, Oxford Brookes Business School, and there are colleagues there who will be presenting sessions and facilitating sessions later in the week. And at University of Salford Business School also will be represented later in the week. And our other partner is Hyperscale Group, which is a technology consultancy based in the West Midlands, who work especially with law firms, advising them on tech adoption. We are mostly business school academics. So the theme of what we do is we're not computer scientists, and we're not law scholars, we're not accountants. We're interested in particular in the organizational aspects of technology adoption. So although technology is important, part of the theme of the week is it isn't all about the tech, it's about the organizational change, and adoption is a human process happening in real flesh and blood organizations, and that's what we want to emphasize this week. The idea of acceleration is taken from accelerators that work in the startup world. So most accelerators, in fact probably all accelerators that you'll find, are about accelerating technology startups to bring their new inventions to market. And the question that was put to us at the outset of all this was, could we apply acceleration to adoption? So instead of the supply side, could we use acceleration ideas on the demand side, helping firms who are adopting technology to do it quicker, differently, better, more effectively? And so that's what we've been trying to do. And what we've been doing is supporting firms in various ways at various stages of adoption maturity, but also in the process of doing it and supporting it, learning about it, so that we can help firms across the sector and try and change the world a bit, really change the sector, help the sector to become more effective at technology adoption, so that it becomes less of a risky, uncertain kind of undertaking, so that firms can adopt technology with confidence. And things have changed a bit in the way we work. We have to apply for funding to do this, and we did that way back in the olden days, before ChatGPT was ever heard of by anybody but a few experts in the world. And so since we started, ChatGPT's arrived on the scene, and lots of other generative AI solutions. So you'll see perhaps in some of the things that we're talking about later in the week, especially that has become to loom larger in people's minds. So we've had to adapt to that. And I think what it's done, amongst other things, is bring technology adoption into the conversation in many, many more firms. It almost can't be avoided anymore. So the time is right. I think we're on we've caught it riding a wave, if you like. We've caught a good moment to be talking about this topic, and that's hopefully what we'll do this week and help you along the way. Okay, I'll just say a little bit more specifically about what we've been doing. These are some very high-level highlights. We've really been actively delivering the program since early 2024 after that setup period. And we've provided direct support. We reckon about 500 hours, combination of training, development, advisory support to 60 plus UK professional service firms across accounting and law, from very small to high end of mid-tier, I would say. And I think we've been successful. It's difficult to define technology adoption success, and it takes a while. So in a few months, I think we've been successful in about 3/4 of the firms we've worked with in either getting them to adopt something they hadn't thought about adopting before, or helping them do it quicker. And in doing that, we've also, I think, enabled firms to unlock further investment. So perhaps we've funded some licenses and they've invested in other licenses, or seconded people to the project, or in other ways provided capacity of their own. And I think importantly, especially in the short term, it's not just about making a technology work, but enabling firms to be better innovators in their own right. So confidently to go forward and develop their own innovation strategies, and to some extent be much more confident in their own right as innovators. We've engaged in all sorts of events. Legal Geek, Accountex will be at this week in the accounting context, various regional events, and in other ways we've engaged through professional bodies, online, in person, and so on. And we've covered the geography pretty well in the firms we've dealt with are from Cornwall to Scotland to Northern Ireland to Ipswich, and in fact there were a few people from overseas who were quite interested, but unfortunately we couldn't fund them as we're UK funded. Okay, so we've I think made a bit of a splash. People know about TiPS. And I'm glad that you're here today, presumably as a result of that. We're also doing research, and we've gathered a few hundred hours of data from observing what goes on in firms. We've done some conventional research interviews, type of thing. So hopefully we'll understand what's going on as well as supporting it, and can turn that into new insights about how better to help the sector and understand the problems that the sector faces more insightfully. And we're also trying, and this is the stage we're at now, in the early stages of developing a kind of a resource which captures some of the insights that we've gleaned over these last 18 months or so, so that we've got something which can benefit the wider sector, other firms who haven't been directly supported by TiPS, which can be used in, first of all, the wider law and accountancy sector, but also, and this is the another little twist in the TiPS tale, is maybe there's something we can learn for innovation in other sectors. So it might be for healthcare, technology adoption, or in other contexts, net zero, you name it. So we're looking for wider understanding of how innovation adoption can be accelerated in anything. No pressure, but we hope we can say something about all these questions that I've outlined. And in a way, that blueprint has informed the structure of this week. We broadly structured our initial insights in the process of technology adoption, from initial strategizing about technology through to making the case within the organization for technology, and then actually doing it and making it stick. So the blueprint, online resource, and other outputs are structured roughly around that kind of model of going from having the idea in the first place that we ought to do something about technology to doing it, making it stick, evaluating it, and planning for the future. And the first session today is about the first stage in that process. And we've called it taking a step back. The business purpose of technology and innovation, and there is the inspiration here, or the starting point is many of you will experience having several emails a week from technology vendors trying to persuade you that their application, their piece of software is just what you need. And we saw from the outset that firms embarking on a process of adoption of technology sometimes just don't know where to start, how to see the wood for the trees amongst all these different offers and opportunities. And it's easy to get confused by how many technologies there are, but also to think the answer's in the technology, that if only we choose the right technology, everything will be all right. And we think that isn't right. The technology matters, and some technology is better than others or more appropriate than others, but it's important to think about why on earth we're doing it in the first place. So that's the theme for today. And we've got three panelists who will discuss this over the next hour and a bit. We hope to have some time for questions. Dr. Alistair Brisbourne, who's head of technology at ACCA, the accounting professional body, or one of them, is a member of our advisory board and has been very helpful and supportive throughout the TiPS development right from day one. Peter Masters is director at Tolvan Tax Advisors, an accountants down in Truro, and is one of the firms supported by TiPS. And Katrina Wolfenden is a partner at Waitmans and also the product and innovation director, and has been doing this for a while, let's say. And Waitmans also have been supported by TiPS. And so we're going to discuss this in a fairly free-flowing way. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that I can see everyone, and I'll come back at the end and outline what's going to be happening for the rest of the week. But with that, I'll stop sharing and just begin our conversation. If members of the audience could keep as I'm sure you are, keep the microphones off, do what you like with your cameras. And I can't see everyone, but I'm sure Peter, Katrina, and Alistair are there somewhere. The starting point, as I say, is to think about the reason for technology adoption, and we've seen examples of this in the TiPS firms. In fact, we probably helped that phenomenon come to the surface when we asked people who wanted to take part to apply for TiPS support by asking them, what technology do you think you might be going to adopt? So in fact, we've probably helped to aggravate the problem to some extent. But we asked people to think about how it fitted into their business, how they would see it contributing to business success and development of a strategy. So I'll ask our panelists to discuss that theme and go back to that starting point. And I wonder, Peter, I wonder if you could start us off on that. Well, if you could take us back 2 or 3 years and give us a bit of a sketch of your firm and where you were at that point, and how thinking about a technology in the context of the business began for you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Martin. So Pete Masters from Tolvan. We're quite a small firm in Cornwall. I'll actually take you back a bit further than you mentioned there, Martin, if that's okay. Only just to give a bit of context.
Before TiPS.
Yeah, yeah. So the firm was originally kind of founded in the 90s, and it was kind of a one-man band, and then eventually grew into a bit more. And the founding partner retired in 2019, which was when myself and David took it on as a partnership. But neither one of us having much experience of owning a business or operating businesses. More, I'm a chartered tax advisor, and he's chartered accountant, and it's just kind of taking it on with more of technical knowledge. So we had a very big learning curve in terms of running a business and doing sales and marketing and strategy and all of these sorts of things that you have to learn along the way. But yeah, going to your 2 to 3 years sort of point, I think we had decided to, because nothing off the shelf seemed to fit from a customer relationship manager point of view. So we decided to develop an in-house piece of software to try and sort of patch between our systems. And a friend of mine recommended a platform to do it on, and a developer. So we spoke to him, we started doing that. And I believe when we first applied to your sort of TiPS project under Path B, I was sort of, the application was for development of that product at that time. Now, it turned out that when we actually started on the adventure of kind of figuring out what to do, we took a step back from everything and spoke to some consultants and actually went, is that even the right product for us? And what is our strategy? And we really had to dig into our kind of mission, vision, and values, and kind of what we believe in, why are we here, what are we trying to achieve, and all those types of questions, and realized that actually we've got a much bigger problem in our firm in terms of all of the sort of disparate softwares that we use for accounts production, to tax filing, to the letters, to the practice management, and all that kind of stuff is all separated and not integrated. And so the workflow isn't very smooth. And so we actually decided that before we go further into our own product, that we should look at sort of systems that are out there, and got completely overwhelmed by the number of suppliers and the number of options, really.
Yeah. And what was the your director? So what's the kind of internal basis for making decisions about technology adoption in that context, in a small firm? Because in a larger firm, we're often meeting the technology lead who's trying to persuade, and we'll talk about that later in the week, the managing partner or whoever to part with some money for some technology. But in your case, it's a bit different.
Yeah, it's absolutely a bit different. So the way our firm is organised is we're sort of 12 people in an office, and we see each other all the time and work together all the time. Essentially, it's just myself and my business partner Dave that are on the board that make the decisions, and we can just give the authorization and go ahead, and we're the owners and directors of the business. So it really means that we're quite agile, and we're able to sort of, we've only got sort of 600 or 700 clients, as opposed to some of the bigger firms when it comes to data migration and actually implementing the change and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be easier for us than a bigger firm, I would have thought. But in terms of decision making, it kind of is down to us, and we just have to weigh up the kind of I guess for us it was a lot about, well, staff costs a lot of money, right? So paying people, and especially with like the NI changes and everything else, minimum wage has gone up, and it's like paying people is quite expensive. So if we can make efficiencies with technology and save time, then it's got to be worth the investment, and just kind of trying to weigh that up. It's quite hard to do.
Yeah. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, we'll come back to that, weighing it up a bit later in a bit more detail. Katrina, I've known a bit about Wakeman's for a few years, but it probably goes back farther than that. What was the starting point, if there is such a thing, for tech adoption at Wakeman's, and how has that the process of arguing for it developed over the years?
Yeah, certainly. So we are a top 40 UK based law firm. So we do full service, so kind of any legal problem. And innovation for us really started about 7 or 8 years ago now. So I was a proper lawyer, for want of another term, and moved into knowledge management, and we started to get clients asking what we were doing about innovation. It was very kind of topical at that stage in the legal press. without anybody really knowing what innovation meant, or what, it meant very different things to different people, different lawyers, different clients. So we started off to try and solve some of our kind of internal and client problems. Started with a very small team, about 3 of us doing it around other jobs, and ended up being quite successful. We're now a team of about 35 of us, I think, across many of our offices. And this particular TiPS project for us was really all about adoption. So we've spent these 7 or 8 years running around the offices, doing roadshows, hearts and minds, encouraging people to want to adopt, to want to think differently, to want to use technology to solve their problems. And for us, it was almost the perfect storm with generative AI coming on. So as a products and innovation department, we've worked really hard to build levels of trust, so that people know that if something has got through to a pilot stage, that it's not a waste of their time to want to kind of be involved and take part in that. And almost, I suppose, the worry was that almost with one fell sweep, generative AI, giving out a dodgy hallucination somewhere, had the potential to absolutely undermine all of the kind of that previous work that the team had done. And we're still going to need people to want to take part in pilots, whether they be Gen AI or not. So how could we look at trust in that kind of context, so that people were, I suppose, satisfied that we were looking at the right things, and that their time was being used wisely, and that there was some utility in them taking part in whatever pilots we did, Gen AI or otherwise. So that's really what we were exploring.
And going back to that, the early stages when it was you and 2 other people, was it did it come from, as it were, the top to say as a strategic decision, we need to invest some effort in innovation, or were you kind of insurgents trying to make something happen from within, and trying to disrupt, and kicking against the grain, as it were?
No, I think we're very lucky. We've always had very strong board support for this. I think the driver for it really was clients saying we want innovation. So we're typically a defendant firm on the kind of the claims side. So that means a lot of our work comes from tenders, whether that be for local authorities, hospital trusts, insurance companies, that kind of thing. And we were starting to see them slip in a question, kind of what innovation have you got, without them really knowing the answer or what they needed or anything. And that was really the driver of it. It was starting to become a question from clients. And at the same time, as there is in these things, a lot of innovation by PR in the press. So kind of internally, the chatter was, well, firm X are doing X, Y, and Z, even if actually firm X weren't doing X, Y, and Z, and it was a bit of workflow. That was enough to kind of get everybody talking about it. So very much a kind of a client-driven way of trying to do this, because again, there is no point building or buying something if nobody is ultimately going to use it.
Okay, that's interesting. And Peter, it's a bit different to your story there. It's very much an internal thing for you, isn't it? That there's an opportunity to do things more efficiently rather than being pulled out by your clients.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for us, it's kind of looking at our business goals and kind of we want to double in size in the next sort of 5 years and that kind of thing. And we're thinking with the systems we have, we're not going to get to the place that we need to go. So more driven internally by our goals than it is, externally.
That's interesting, actually. Yeah. Okay. And Alistair, I guess from your research, you'll pick up on some of these kind of questions. What do you hear from your members and firms you encounter, and the wider debate?
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear Katrina and Peter's experiences, because I think they've touched on some of the really salient points already, and they kind of highlight why actually you can't really treat tech adoption as like a one-time exercise, especially these days when things are moving quite quickly. You're getting new capabilities emerging. So there's like a continuous monitoring aspect and a continuous learning aspect to it, of course. But broadly, they've kind of touched on 3 areas that are really critical. One is the technology, sure, but as everyone's also said, right, we've got to avoid that like shiny object syndrome where we're just really excited about what something can do. Katrina's points around generative AI are really good in this regard. And just remember that technology is like the enabler to to something that we're trying to achieve. And, you know, Katrina's pointed out for her, it was client driven largely. Peter, it was more about like internal efficiencies. And so then there's that second piece that they've touched on, which is the understanding your organization, right? What's your organizational culture? What's your structure? Like what's your level of digital maturity is a really important one. And you know, what state is your data in, and how can you use it? What are the gaps in it? What do you need to do to get it to the point where you can actually use any of these new capabilities in the first place? So really understanding your organization thoroughly, and then where you want to go with it. So think about like, this is where we are now. What's our target operating model? Where do we want to be, and where does technology fit into that in terms of helping us achieve that? And then there's the external pieces, like the kind of competitive landscape. It's, you know, how client demands or expectations are changing. And so fitting those three things together is like an important piece of the puzzle. And that makes sure that, you know, you have that strategic alignment throughout, that you're not just kind of pursuing this kind of very limited scope adoption of technology, but you don't have in mind what the real value for your organization is going to be at the end of the day. Like, you have to have those business objectives in mind, right? If your strategy is to focus on customer experience, then prioritize your customer data and maybe CRM over things like back-end automation, and then involve the right stakeholders as early on as you possibly can. Because I think another thing that's often missed, you know, there's the shiny object syndrome, which we can fall prey to, but I think something that's also missed in tech adoption, but in transformation more broadly, is the fact that change management is often a lot more costly than people assume it's going to be, and it's also much more important for the success of any kind of technology adoption. So, yeah, I would say if you're sort of starting out from that kind of broad starting point, and you have those clear business objectives, what you're trying to achieve, and I'm sure we'll delve into some of the details of all those things as we go through the discussion. But I think Katrina and Peter have touched on some of the really salient kind of aspects of that already.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the preparing the way and investing in the transformation, and there have been one or two other firms supported by TiPS who've majored on that in their project. So rather than the technology implementation in a technical sense being the be all and end all, there's a couple of cases where it's been an investment in just finding out what's really needed and preparing the ground in a very systematic detailed way. You mentioned now Alistair, the sort of future vision of where the firm wants to be. How far do you think people look ahead in doing that? A year, 5? I don't know. This is my eternal balancing act between long-term vision, and then someone invents ChatGPT, which lands from outer space, and then everything's.
That's right. Things get fuzzy pretty quickly as you start projecting into the future. So you do have to be careful. And I think that, you know, this brings us into a whole question around like intangibles and what we can and can't quantify and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, if you have like a sort of 5-year vision where you have an idea of where you want to be, that's a really good starting point, especially when things like the adoption of technology, usually year 1, there's sort of a lot of upheaval. Year 2 and 3 is maybe where you start to see some of the benefits come through, and then so if you think about it in that gradual sense, you're looking on a 5-year horizon to getting to a point where, you know, maybe you're actually extracting real value and moving forward in what you want to achieve. Beyond that is, as you say, Martin, incredibly difficult to prophecy.
Yeah. Well,
so
yes, we'll find out on Friday how far we can look. 5 years sounds ambitious to me. I don't know.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
But you can, I guess, the business vision for a longer period is a bit more tenable than predicting what the technology will be doing in 2 years. Yeah, but as Peter's discussed there, if you've got a broad idea that you want to grow the business, then that sets the stage a bit, doesn't it? And I mean, that sort of leads to the next question. In fact, we've touched on it a bit. I wonder if there's, TiPS is based of its nature being an accelerator around relatively short adoption projects where, to a greater or lesser extent, firms do a thing over a period of 8 to 10 months. It perhaps is in the context of a wider digital transformation process, more or less explicitly set out. If that one takes over, and Peter or Katrina, if you become too preoccupied with the long-term digital transformation plan and wanting to really nail that down, is there a danger, do you think, that you could become kind of paralyzed, waiting until you've got it all worked out and missing opportunities that do come along? So sometimes the shiny things are good, maybe, and you should just dive in and have a go. What do you think, Katrina?
Yep. So I think there's an element, isn't there, of having that kind of longer term vision and the ability to pivot and to pick up on trends. So a lot of the time, some of my team are spent on kind of looking at the horizon, what's coming, but not just in law, because frankly, that's boring. There's far more interesting tech in other areas. And that kind of, the paralysis by analysis is a danger, I think, that it's really easy for innovation teams to fall in. So I suppose the context when I'm speaking about this kind of thing is the software I'm looking to bring in, buy or make isn't usually keep the firm running, keep the lights on type of software. So it's usually the ancillary stuff that is going to help us either review documents faster or go into a different area of service, that kind of thing. So I am rarely in charge of kind of a core system, which obviously would need a lot of analysis to be able to want to switch it out or replace it, given the kind of importance of these things within professional services. So to that extent, I think we're able to do a relatively rough and ready analysis to get us into a position to decide. And again, this could go on forever, couldn't it? You've basically got to say, as of today, is a decision I make right for today? We all know that the technology will have come on leaps and bounds that I probably even would make the same decision in 6 weeks or 6 months. And it's the kind of, does it solve a problem for now? Have I surveyed enough of the market? Have I narrowed it down? Have we made some sensible decisions? And can we explore a couple to pilot? And that's the way we try and do it. So very much a try and fail fast, because otherwise we'd all still be filling in forms by Christmas of who knows what year.
Yeah, don't talk to me about filling in forms. I've just moved house. Anyway, I won't say any more about solicitors. Pete, I suppose we've seen, and that was another starting point for TiPS, is the smaller firms, especially, maybe haven't got much slack to do the stepping back and thinking about it, and there's been perhaps too much of a tendency, or it's easy to see why there is a tendency to say eventually, but now I just need to do this thing because I've got a client who wants something doing next week, or we just need to fix that problem with a particular process, and we'll worry about the big picture later.
Yeah, it's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day. I mean, obviously myself and Dave still do the fee earning and still do the day-to-day work. And when there's these pressing things that you have to do, that are coming up all the time, deadlines, and it's just constant work, it's very hard to step back and actually think, when are we going to have time to, we haven't got an innovation department, we haven't got, people working on this full time. So it's, when are we going to have time to actually go through that supplier? Is that a good supplier? Is that a good supplier? And it's, this procurement process and everything else, it's such a lengthy thing, and it's just trying to carve out that time. So, I mean, the TiPS project, going through that was just incredible for us, because we was kind of forced to take that time, and we went through all these suppliers, and we were looking at all the big software houses first, and we're kind of like, it must be one of these, that's got the integrated solution. We just want something that covers everything. So we're scrapping all these systems and we're going to a full thing. But then we actually thought, we want a cloud-based strategy in the long term. So we want it all to be integrated and cloud-based. And then a lot of the big software houses weren't quite there yet, so they were showing us, Iris Elements, for example, and sort of Onvio with the Thomson Reuters and this kind of stuff. And it was, everything we asked was like, that's in development, this will be there, it will work, we promise. And I'm kind of like, how do I trust these people? And, how do we, partner ourselves to these guys? So we ended up looking at smaller firms, and then we did eventually find Capium that seemed to be a better partner for us, because they're a smaller supplier. They started on a cloud-based platform, and they will hopefully be a really good partner for us. And we're on that journey now.
Okay. And I don't know, had you tried before? What is this business of finding time? So we see that especially with the smaller firms that we've worked with is just making time, finding time, getting the resource to either write your own solution or just release people from fee earning to do some training. Or yeah.
Well, yeah, that's it. And we're hiring people that are, for a specific task, like to be an accountant. And a lot of the time,
Yes.
it's kind of like, even if I release their time and I say, could you research this or can you look into that? It might not be their skill set or it might not be their strength. And then is it even my strength? And should we, think about having another partner in or something because of the fact that we are fee earners ourselves? And so yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to upskill myself all the time. I just see life as a learning all the time and just trying to figure this stuff out. And I think it's a lot to do with a balance as well. Like we were talking, you could sit there and just be overwhelmed and basically be paralyzed by this sort of analyzing all these things. It's like you have to put things into action and you have to learn along the way. Otherwise, you just, but you can't just jump straight in without any thought. So it's that balance between kind of research and analysis, but then getting in there and trying some things.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if you got anything out, Alistair, from your membership there. Arguments about just dealing with business as usual and never finding time for this innovation you're trying to tell them to do.
Yeah, completely. I think it's just such a common discussion we have, is that firms just say, yeah, look, we know what we'd like to do, but we just have no idea when we're actually going to be able to do it. We don't have the time. We don't have the resource. We're not, bringing in a load of consultants. We're not hiring loads of people to deal with this. And so it's really difficult. And I think, but if we kind of back up to that point about paralysis by analysis, I think, I mean, a lot of our research and our transformational journeys work, or even more recently when we look at some of the like adoption of AI within accounting and finance, it's the same kind of thing where the challenges people are identifying, which is basically making them stand still in their tracks, are things like the fear of failure, right? Because there's a huge amount of uncertainty, and so they think, right, what if we sink a huge amount of time and money into this and it doesn't actually achieve the outcomes? And that sort of makes them stop, and they say, that brings them then to the expertise and skills question, right? And they say, well, we don't even understand this technology sufficiently, so how are we supposed to make a good decision on it? And then that brings us back to the kind of first discussion we had around that kind of lack of having a clear vision. Often you find like organizations, they've identified something cool that they think could be helpful, but at the same time as they're having discussions with vendors, they're all trying to figure out what their strategy is and what they're trying to do as an organization, and trying to do those things in parallel, which doesn't quite work out typically. So I think that is a really big problem. And I think one of the things that you kind of need to learn how to do, part of the skill set, is how we can actually judge a technology without having full knowledge. To Katrina's point, right? It's really difficult to have full information. So we need to be comfortable with decision making under uncertainty. But if we're guided by, again, what we're trying to achieve, then we can put certain things into place to help us do that and say, right, what's the, adopting, terminology from the tech world, what's the minimum viable product that's going to get us there? And then start to experiment, start to test and learn, really test and learn. Like that's the big thing moving forward, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, and I think design thinking sort of ideas like that have cropped up a few times in firms we've worked with. And yeah, I'm on the point about finding time. I mean, even running the activities in TiPS, there's we could run this thing in November, December, and then the lawyer say, no, it's the year end, we can't do that. And then now we can do this thing in January, February. No, it's the end of the self-assessment return deadline, and then it's the end of the tax year. And when do we get it? And then it's the summer holidays. Yeah. So we've had to duck and weave a bit around these pressures. And I think it's particularly so in really small firms, smaller even than Peter's, that where participating is a real fragile activity, where just one big problem with a client in a firm with a handful of staff means they're out of it. That takes over the whole business, and there's certainly no space for doing these nice to innovation activities. Peter, you mentioned, I think, or you started to touch on realizing that there would be some kind of financial benefit, or there's some cost saving, labor saving kind of motivation. So how far did you go with kind of quantifying that? How far do you think you can go?
Yeah, it's been quite difficult because, again, time to put in the amount of time that we could quantify it accurately. But what we did was kind of just took the journey of a simple kind of job, like with a typical one that we do in the firm, and then look at what is going on with the process, and like how much of it is manual entry. And we were trying to actually like quantify an amount of time. So say the job took 8 hours in total, and we were like, how much of that would be saved if this bit was integrated and this bit was integrated and this bit was integrated? So it's things like the letters being auto-populated by the sort of tax figures and the dates and the names and that kind of stuff. And like the integration between the bookkeeping and the accounts production. So if that's a digital link rather than like a manual trial balance or something like that that's going on. And to be honest, each job's quite different. So we just had to take an average, and we just thought that, what, if we can save an hour, 1/8 of that 8-hour job, every single time, and then you think that's like 1/8 of our wages kind of thing. Really broadly speaking, we're not looking at the minutiae of kind of things. It was more just, on average, how can we look at this and make a decision on it? Because if we know roughly that 1/8 of our wage cost is going to go down, then we can go, okay, we could budget for 10% of that or something, and put that towards a software cost, and then we know that we're going to be okay. And then we're looking at it and going, well, we don't want to make like any redundancies or shortfalls in labour, but what it means is we can grow without having to take on more team members potentially. So that's the way we've kind of looked at it.
Yeah, just something that seems not outlandish as a possible outcome, and turn that into a So you didn't just calculate the net present value of your capital investment and all that kind of stuff that I seem to remember learning many years ago.
That's what my business partner did,
Oh.
But I'm a chartered tax advisor, so okay. I don't get into all that stuff. But perhaps if you got David on, he could talk you through the sort of net present value and the project costs and all that kind of side of things.
No, but seriously, did you get down to that kind of thing, or go? That's probably going to be worth doing.
He did to the extent of like on the broad. So it was kind of that broad thing, but it wasn't. Like I say, it wasn't down to the real detail. But he did actually, get involved on net present values.
Okay. Oh well. I'm speaking out of turn there. And Katrina, I remember interviewing people at Wakeman's quite a few years ago and asking around document review software that you've used. So does it save money? Has it paid for itself? Have you? And there was a bit of maybe not quite sure yet. That was a while ago. How have you tackled that in the early days, and then subsequently the financial hard-nosed justification of investments?
Yeah, so I think in the early days there were just 3 of us, none of us, well, all having been lawyers, so all kind of moving over to have a go at innovation. So I think it's fair to say our processes were pretty much back of a fag packet, and we did enough to kind of keep going at that stage. I think we've learned over time a kind of return on investment we're looking for as an organisation, and how to better quantify that. And again, I suppose to Peter's point, that could be being able to do more with fewer people, or being able to do things in a shorter time frame, or to be able to give clients a bigger review of something that they might otherwise have been able to do kind of on a manual thing. And projects like document review talk to those kind of things. So document review technology in particular, I suppose for law firms, is a nice thing because it's got a cost almost. We can work out almost a cost per document, and we can use our various systems and work out roughly what it's costing a lawyer to do a similar task. And there've been some particular projects where we will, given the scale of them, we will literally set a person going on the same task and have somebody using a system. So we've got that actual comparison for the particular project. And a couple of them we've done where it's been an hour of lawyer time sat there doing something, reviewing a document. It's been reduced to 6 minutes of lawyer time if they're using the system at the same time. And I suppose what that's meant for us is that we've been able to perhaps take on work that would otherwise had to have turned down. So these big kind of document review projects, they always come over Christmas or summer holidays when, half the firm's away and the deadline's always really, really short. And, even if people volunteer to sit up through the night, nobody does the best work at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to, pull out particular clauses of documents. And on a kind of a cost per document basis for a client, lawyers in a room are expensive. And if you've got thousands and thousands of documents and you as a client want to be able to extrapolate out those insights, you want to be pretty sure you're getting a really good representative set of documents reviewed, or you want to review as many as possible. They're kind of your options, aren't they? So using that kind of document review technology lets us go, maybe 70 or 80% of the documents where maybe costing that manually would be maybe 10, 20, 30%. So really being able to have those conversations with clients about kind of risk appetite and what they're actually trying to get out of it. In terms of, I suppose, of the financial benefits of other tech, we've always got at the beginning, we know what problem we're trying to solve. So we've got some of the team are very much more focused on the R&D, the speculative, let's just have a play, let's see how things interact. Wouldn't it be interesting if that worked kind of stuff? But the bulk of the team's work is very much problem driven, and that's either from an internal client or an external client. They're very real, tangible problems we're trying to solve. And I think that then helps you drive looking at kind of benefit in that, because you usually know what an existing service is, or whether it's prohibitively expensive to do it, or if it's a new area, what it's going to cost to kind of get your toe into the market. So we do a fair amount of analysis kind of upfront to try and work out what existing kind of costs are. But again, very much geared at trying to solve a particular problem, so not in kind of isolation, and very much kind of a looking at that end goal in mind.
Yeah, and I know it's early days a bit yet with generative AI and Copilot, ChatGPT, etc. But it seems to me that whereas those applications that we were looking at a few years ago are point solutions for a particular process, so you can say, how did we do it before? How do we do it now? And make some comparisons. The Copilot and things are quite more distributed sort of application. There's someone over there using it for a memo, someone over there helping draft a report. And how do you capture and justify that kind of investment in time
so
and money?
The Gen AI in particular, I think, is problematic for professional service firms. So, law firms we're used to, aren't we, recording time on 6-minute intervals. We literally know to the 6 minutes what people are doing. And it, these kind of Gen AI is difficult because you've got very legal specific technology within that. So you could go and subscribe to one of the something that just does legal Gen AI. You've got the mass productivity. You've got things that could help your marketing departments, your finance departments, and everything in between. And I think the trouble is this technology, almost regardless of scale of firm, is just expensive on a per person basis when you factor in the additional licenses you need to be able to get the insights and that thing back. And I don't think really anybody in the professional service world has kind of cracked that ROI. So there was an interesting paper from PwC before Christmas. So the top 100 law firms, 1 in the top 10 admitted to being able to kind of monetize that ROI from Gen AI and had seen that kind of benefit come back in. And by definition, the way it was kind of that data was collected, that was a firm in the top 10. And I mean, these are the absolutely massive international firms with, roomfuls of people looking at this stuff. And you think, wow, if only 1 out of 10 in that kind of sphere of firm has cracked it, then, it's no wonder that the rest of us are feeling that this is really quite difficult to work out.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting. Good news. Is it good news for Microsoft? I'm not sure. Alistair, anything on this? What do you get for your members? Are they doing the sums, or is it the back of a fag packet?
Yeah, I mean, I got to be careful what I say about calculations here. I work for an accounting body.
Yeah.
On the Gen AI discussion is interesting because it's problematic on all sides. Katrina's right. I haven't seen anyone who's figured out exactly how to kind of calculate ROI on a Gen AI initiative. And on the other side, it's being driven largely by like the theoretical intangible benefits, but there are also some very real intangible risks that we haven't figured out either. And so it's just messy on all fronts. But I think on the kind of calculation side, it's an interesting one because I think we are seeing a shift here. Because I think there is really interesting research actually to show that over the long term, some of the intangible benefits associated with adopting a technology, obviously done in the right way, massively outweigh some of the financial benefits. And so again, it speaks to the fact that, you know, having really clear alignment with your strategy and where you're trying to go is incredibly important. But that's not to say that we should just say like out with the calculations, let's run purely off judgment, because the most successful approach is still to do a kind of blend of exactly what Peter and Katrina have said, like blending a bit of quantification with some of that strategic judgment side. You know, granted, we might not have perfect figures in terms of our calculations, but at least it gives us kind of a starting point to make some kind of assessment on the sort of like financial value or payback there. But also like what we're seeing as well is a lot of our members talking about adoption being more about things like the option value, like how does it maybe improve their future capabilities or address future needs. So make sure that they're kind of resilient, future ready in a way. So sometimes it's actually not about a kind of immediate benefit or a benefit over the next couple of years. It's more like a long-term vision. And that means that the traditional approach to like tech adoption, which is like based on the business case where you have like NPV and ROI calculated, and you know approval is kind of contingent on having all these things specified with a clear time frame and everything like that. That's kind of changing a little bit more into a sort of value-based calculation. And one of the drivers behind that is the kind of realization that the real benefit of the business case is actually the narrative associated with it. It's actually the story of why you're doing what you're doing, and then accepting, right, that is actually something that we need to keep coming back to and keep evolving with, you know, as we sort of test and learn along the way. And so that's becoming a little bit more fluid. It's not just about business cases, it's more about things like value cases, and then being able to kind of roll with the punches through the first couple of years, which are inevitably going to be more difficult, and adapting as you go along. So
Just a bit more. The value case is interesting. What do you have in mind? What does that capture differently than a business case?
Yeah, so I think the key is it's much less focused on like strict financial metrics, much more focused on things like non-financials. So if you think about even measuring like employee satisfaction or like NPS scores, customer satisfaction, things like that, it's more qualitative metrics to understand, okay, where are we maybe not seeing direct benefits to our, say, bottom line right now, but what we are seeing is we're growing as an organization in terms of what we're able to do. So there's some other ways to assess that, I think.
Yeah, that reminds me that some of the firms involved in TiPS have said that, you know, attracting and retaining younger staff who expect to use technology effectively is, you know, an important part of the calculation, but not calculation, but the judgment, which is difficult to nail down in terms of a cost benefit. But
and it's an important one to try to track that. It's imperfect, as all these things are, but I mean that's something that we're constantly seeing as well, especially amongst younger. I mean, I don't know whether this is the same in the legal profession, but certainly in the accounting profession, like entrance to the profession, younger people, more junior staff are much more concerned about the impact of like technology on their future career path and their progression and their development, because like rightly or wrongly, all the narratives around technology, all the narratives around AI in particular, are basically telling them they're going to be out of a job sometime soon. So you know, the onus is on, you know, part ACCA, but also organizations themselves to make sure that they are communicating really clearly what the benefits are to those individuals as well as to the organization.
Yes, yeah, certainly. And I think the intangible and unpredictable upsides. You mentioned the possible the risks of things like generative AI, but I'm thinking again, Katrina, of instances in Waitman's where other business opportunities open up in a way that couldn't really have been anticipated at the outset, where you almost get to know the client's business better than they do as a part of the process of applying the technology to helping them out. Do you somehow try and capture that, or is it just a nice sort of bonus when you realise you can offer advisory services that you did, or strategic kind of advice that you didn't really ever do before?
Yeah, I think that additional level of insight, every client loves to be told something about themselves that they don't already know, don't they? That that insight being given back, really valuable for them as a business. And I suppose we've had projects internally where we've built and sold software now to clients to deal with particular problems for them. So that for us, almost the risk mitigation piece. So rather than have to wait for the accident to happen, wait for whatever kind of legal incident would usually give rise to them coming to us, help them de-risk their business, and deal with it that way. But yeah, certainly, technology, doesn't it? I think what especially for professional service firms, usually those relationships, it's kind of like lawyer to lawyer, isn't it? So you'd know your corresponding equivalent in a client, but you probably wouldn't know who their head of IT or innovation or those kind of things, or their change champions. So this working in this area suddenly allows us to build up those networks as well with clients, and just ultimately learn a lot more about their business, which obviously always helps.
Okay, yeah, and Peter, I guess it's you're mainly concerned with looking at the services that you already offer and doing that more effectively and so on. But have you got thoughts about moving into more added value advisory kind of work on the back of the technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these Gen AI and things like that the tools that are coming in now are going to change the sort of relationship between accountants and their clients. And I think, like, from my point of view, it's going to be a lot more around the education piece and kind of training them, rather than just like transactional, here's books, here's your thing, see you next year kind of support that we used to give. I think it's much more now an ongoing relationship where, and similar to what Katrina was just saying, in terms of understanding their business, giving them some business advice, or just being at the sounding board to kind of go back and forth from. And I think, even to the point of we're going through all this adoption and change and learning through that process, and their organization probably also requires similar things. So it's just kind of being there more as a supporting partner, and I think that's the way our industry is going. So yeah, we're certainly branching out into new services, into business advisory, and also looking at what else we can do. And we're also looking at sort of new opportunities, and like me and Dave are always looking for, say for example, it might be that we partner with someone else and we set up another thing, and then we might be able to offer that as a service. So yeah, and just how we can grow the organization in any way possible, really.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other things which perhaps we didn't anticipate as much at the outset, is the extent to which these capabilities within firms that are participating in TiPS have been developed. So they've, in a number of cases, just become really good at things like understanding internal users' needs, or communicating effectively about a technology, and learning those reusable capabilities that inside the organization that we didn't perhaps anticipate. We'd hoped that might happen, but it's played out in different ways than we anticipated, I think. Some of us are going, well, I'm going to be there at Countex on Wednesday, Thursday, and there'll be hundreds probably of technologies there on display, including TiPS. TiPS has a stand with the ESRC and Innovate UK. And well, they're equivalent events in the law world, of course. For people on the call, what if they're wandering around at one of these events and exhibition? How should they make sense of it all? Who do you talk to? What do you ask people?
I think my top tip would be to take your boss's name badge and use that instead, because then they'll be the ones to get all the begging emails after. I suppose for me, so the actual kind of going to events, it's having a bit of a plan, isn't it? So quite often these events are to network and reconnect with kind of peers and things. But from the technology side, you usually aren't you able to get a list in advance. I am at things this week, and the emails have already started of people kind of wanting to meet up. And I would say kind of try and do a little bit of research first, because they will talk to you for hours if you let them, and I suppose have a bit of a plan. So I mean, I only kind of laugh and jest that I would nick my boss's badge. We do kind of divide and conquer, and I think the best way of dealing with these kind of conferences is to have a bit of a plan for the types of technology you want to look at. So you want to make sure that you see the kind of the whole range and don't miss out on something that you absolutely want to see. The demos at these things, it's like when you have a demo in your own organization, these things always look slicker than perhaps they are in the messy world of professional services on kind of your own data, your own systems, and with imperfect people using it. So kind of take the demos. It's like when you watch something on TV, isn't it? Like the chopping stuff, and it looks like they've been chopping forever. It's that simple. So take that kind of with a pinch of salt. And again, if they will literally talk to you for hours if you don't have your exit strategy. And this used to really put off some of my junior colleagues for going, because they're like, how do I get out of these kind of conversations if I'm there? And a lot of them, it is, especially some of the legal conferences, it is quite a hard sell if you've not been to these kind of things before. It's like you can't even run for a cup of tea without being got. So I always think the best line is to say that I'm not the budget holder, which is fine until my boss is also walking around and we're both saying we're not the budget holder, and we meet in the middle and we have to run. So that if you need your exit, that's your best line. Don't hold the budget, because they will quickly move on.
And something came up in a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago, and we were wondering whether, again, generative AI, because if you go along thinking I need a document review software or I need an audit analytics, whatever it is, the categories seem to be breaking down a bit, because the generative AI seems to be making these boundaries blur, and everyone's having to go encroaching on everyone else's territory. As suddenly you have the document review with the AI that helps you do something else. Is that a passing phase, do you think, or is it are the boundaries going to break down?
I think loads of existing technology has suddenly then added a Gen AI capability on top of it, whether it was required or it wasn't. So we've seen that very much in the legal market. And I think at last count, there was something like 550 new entrants just as kind of legal Gen AI software.
Yeah.
And we know from previous kind of, trends and that kind of thing that they won't all be there in 2, 3, 4 years. And I suppose the thing for people in kind of my roles in professional service firms is you're trying to hedge your bets, aren't you? So whatever the risk appetite of your organization is in terms of wanting to kind of keep procuring and onboarding this kind of stuff, whether you want to be working with startups that might not be able to have all the kind of the ISO accreditation or the cybersecurity, all the kind of things that you would expect them to have. So very much it depends on kind of risk appetite to want to do all of that. And again, a lot of it is having that kind of balanced portfolio. So we've worked with startups and we work with some very big organizations, but we wouldn't necessarily ask those two, I suppose, opposing ends to try and fix the same problem. For different reasons.
Yeah. And what have you found, Peter, as a sort of best mechanism for navigating all these offers and possibilities?
I think just sort of it's exactly what Katrina's saying. I think just go in with a plan, because if you're just wandering around, you're just going to waste your time, and like you'll get stuck in these conversations. So I think even if it's just like, say, these 3 questions where it's just like, that offering that they're giving, does it actually solve a problem that you've identified in the firm? Because if it's just a shiny thing that they're going on about, and does it actually solve a problem that you have? Another good question I think to ask yourself is, like, can it actually integrate with the systems that we have? You know, is there some sort of open API link between what they're doing and what you have? And then, you know, is there going to be sort of support and training? You know, if we're going to implement this into our firm and we're going to ask our team to, you know, get on board with this, we're going to need to know that there's some sort of support and training, and you know, get these questions written down and really pound on those, and then you can sort of make your notes, move on to the next one, and then hopefully make sense of all these offerings and suppliers and whittle it down to just a few.
Yeah. How's the professional body's role in this navigation process, Alistair, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say I don't envy Katrina or Peter or anyone like them attending these events, because I know I attend these events as a researcher, and I get absolutely sort of drowned in requests from vendors to speak to me one-to-one, and I have to break it to them gradually that I don't make any buying decisions.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what they're up to, but I'm not
Yes.
buying anything. Sorry. So yeah, I can only imagine. And
me too.
I just also say on the Gen AI side, I won't tell any tales here. I won't name any vendors, but speaking to one big software provider, they very explicitly said that they think Gen AI is just a complete money pit right now, but they're still producing solutions. They're still trying to sell them because they need to recoup some investment, and they think there might be something down the line. They're still trying to figure out what people want with it. And so that's something to keep in mind as well when everyone's coming up with their flashy new tool that they want to sell you, is that, you know, they're trying to figure it out as they're going along. They know their issues along the way. And some of the things that we've been quite surprised by, talking about like gaining API access to new tools or any new AI tools that are being offered. A good question to ask, and sometimes we've been really surprised at how behind some vendors are on this, is just where are they with their kind of data protection assessments and things like that around the new tool, because sometimes it's shocking that they haven't gone through all of those requirements at the point in time when they're already speaking to people. It's kind of a hypothetical scenario, but so there's all those kind of questions. But yeah, from more broadly from an ACCA point of view, I mean, like we stay vendor agnostic. So I know some other bodies do sort of qualify different solutions or vendors. We try not to, though. Sort of we speak informally about them in other settings. But I think it is, you know, exactly what Peter's pointed out and what we've talked about throughout this. It's sort of kind of, it's knowing what you're trying to achieve. It's knowing what that minimal viable product looks like. It's knowing what the kind of critical areas for you are in terms of capability, in terms of risks, and just pushing back on vendors. You know, don't assume that what they're showing you is what you're going to get, but also don't assume that it's all they can provide.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, just round off, and then perhaps there'll be a bit of time for some questions. With a perhaps advice for a firm at the start of their technology adoption trajectory, thinking they ought to do something, maybe having had a little dabble, but wondering what to do now. What would be your main piece of advice? And perhaps Katrina, go back to those early days, perhaps.
Yeah.
And a smaller firm probably than Wakeman's in many cases.
So I suppose my best piece of advice, and the projects that have worked best for us, is pick a problem to solve where it matters to enough people that you solve it, and that it's actually something that people do want solved. So probably the best example of this we ever did was we created, so lawyers obviously love an email. We get hundreds of emails every day. These all have to sit and be manually saved onto our case management system, which is effectively becomes our system of record. So every matter that we deal with as a law firm has its own reference, and all the kind of documentation sits on that. Saving all those emails is the most dullest job known to anybody, especially in the days when it didn't even integrate with your phone or anything. So you'd be out all day seeing clients, get a pile of emails, have to sit on a train and physically attach them all. And we created an email filing assistant that basically did that for them. So once there'd been that first email, you obviously had your metadata, and you could essentially in the back end just match it up. So nothing absolutely kind of revolutionary, but the kind of the groundswell and the, you know, we had emails, never happens in a law firm, actually thanking us for, you know, solving a problem and for the IT working and all of this. So actually, you know, it really made a difference to people. And it was, I suppose, in those early days, we picked stuff that gave us enough bang for our buck, so it would enough of the firm would either be interested in it or want to use it. So again, things like chatbots before there was Gen AI, to take that who do I, how do I, where is, remove that kind of routine queries away from people. Just anything that makes kind of ultimate end users lives a little bit easier. But that would be my top tip. Pick something that actually matters to solve. I mean, firstly, pick something to solve. Don't just wander around, but actually pick something that matters to enough people.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah. Any thoughts on that one, Peter?
I think
top tip.
Top tip would be to really take the time to understand your own organization, I suppose, and understand what, you know, your values are, what your sort of goals are, what your vision is, and that kind of thing too, and see if it's in alignment with like the problem you're trying to solve. Because sometimes you end up just thinking, oh, this is a great idea, let's do that, but all of a sudden, you know, it's not actually what your business is trying to achieve overall. You're just solving a little problem that's going a bit sideways. So I would say, yeah, just make sure, and if it's not the same people, you know, if you've got like an innovation department with problem, and then the sort of people running or whatever, that they're in alignment and they're communicating and all of that kind of thing.
Thank you. Yeah. And Alistair, any emerging themes from all your members?
Yeah, I'll just come back to this point around the value case, because I think it is really important to move away from this kind of single point in time approach, and think about it more in terms of value, where it's not just looking at the kind of results that were speculated at the beginning of the program, but looking at how you're actually doing across the entire life cycle of the program. So reporting on progress and the measures and the benefits that were envisioned back at stage one, but then also, you know, contained within that is sort of a theory of change, because if you have that idea of where you're trying to go, you know what this is, it's kind of operationalizing how you want to get there. In a way, technology is an aspect of that. And so, you know, that value case has a much more kind of, I guess, robust definition of how what you're doing aligns with the strategic goals of the organization. And that's just really fundamental, because that's how you bring in the non-financial aspects that are so difficult to qualify, to actually understand. But you know, it's about the organization's identity sometimes as much as it's about the kind of financial benefits, and it's about who you want to be for your clients, who your clients want you to be, and everything like that. So I would just double down on that point about the value case and being a little bit more fluid and evolve with adoption.
Thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks everyone for those words of wisdom over the last hour or so.